Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join the H3 Energy Investor webinar. I'm pleased today to have Nik Sykiotis talking on behalf of the company. Now, look, last time we did a webinar was in October. It was really when Warro was still really quite conceptual. All we really had was the Steve Adams report in our hand, suggesting that Nik's strong belief or theory, I guess, that Warro could actually be commercial after all was really just a theory. And I'm pleased to say that in the last 6 months, Nik has been working incredibly hard. Not all of that work is always totally apparent to the market, but he has progressed this asset incredibly well. And we've had a second independent expert now basically provide a report where they said that there are technically no reasons why gas couldn't flow commercially from Warro, which is huge, as the largest undeveloped gas resource, I believe, in onshore Australia, certainly in the Perth Basin. So, yeah, very pleased to hand over to Nik, who can talk further about that announcement and other advancements for H3. Cheers.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Michael said, it's been an exciting 6 months, and particularly the last piece of work that was completed by Molyneux and Associates has really given us a lot of confidence about this asset. So I might just jump straight into it. Pete, can you get the next slide, please? There's our usual disclaimer. Just a corporate snapshot for people who may not be new to the register. We're a small company targeting hydrogen, helium, and natural hydrogen. We've got two main assets. We've got the Warro asset in the Perth Basin and the Alinea project in the Officer Basin. Both have progressed very well in the last 6 months. We have 3 new studies actually that show that there's no reason why a potentially commercial flow of gas couldn't come out from Warro. Officer Basin is drill ready, and we're speaking to a few people to farm into that project. So that's very exciting. And fundamentally, I mean, both these projects are enormous. If one or both come in, it will be a very different company in 6 to 12 months. I'll just go through the board and management. You can see Mark is our chairman. He's a very capable person. Tino, very experienced in the oil and gas space. Professor Archer, she's a very well-credited academic on several small oil and gas company boards. She's a really great asset to the team. So is Richard. A lot of experience, majors, small companies, was the president of CUFPEC locally for the last 10 years or so. Then there's myself and Caitlin. We've also got a lot of help from a lot of good consultants, particularly with Perth Basin expertise, which is really good. Next slide, please. So back to Warro, which is the main focus of this presentation. Look, fundamentally, it's all in the title. There's nothing wrong with these rocks. There's a lot of gas in the ground, and it should be able to flow at least portions of the reservoir. Specifically for this study, we wanted to have a good look at the engineering data, both in terms of quality and quantity, before we jump straight into a big new reinterpretation. The review was really positive. So what data was available? Now, I must say, legacy data set is quite poor in places, and not all the wells were run, all the logs were run on every well. So it's a bit patchy and incomplete. But Warro 3 and 6 had good PLTs. They were acquired properly, they were interpreted properly, and intervals within Warro 3 and 6, particularly towards the top of the reservoir, show that there was substantial amounts of gas flowing into the tool. So once again, if we can suppress the water from further down, there's no reason why this reservoir can't flow gas to surface on its own at reasonable quantities. Again, and this is just building up the case. So we started with Steve Adams. So he basically said, look, that it's not a continuous column of gas. There are parts that are water wet, so avoid those. We then had a look at the image logs. There was a theory going around in the market for a long time that Warro's all the seals are breached, and there's a lot of natural fractures that are bringing water in all along the wellbore. That's not correct. There's large parts of the reservoir that are full of gas without natural fractures, and if we put the right well in the right spot, we should be able to get it to flow. Also, a lot has changed in the last sort of 15 years since the last appraisal campaign was done on this field by previous operator. we've got horizontal drilling, we've got reservoir stimulation techniques that are far better and far more advanced to target these type of reservoirs. I must also say there is a portion of this reservoir that has enough permeability to potentially flow on its own without stimulation. So yes, you won't get the whole resource, that there are a lot of tight pockets in there, but I think with a horizontal well in a reasonably dry zone of gas, I think there will be good volumes come through. Again, all this needs to be proven. A good thing as well, we've got 4 existing well bores that are cased and suspended, haven't been abandoned yet. So this makes for cheap appraisal. To drill a new well in the Perth Basin, you're looking anywhere between $17 to $20 million today. To go back into one of these wells and either reperforate a zone or try and isolate a zone or kick off into a horizontal well or potentially deepen. We think there could be deeper potential on the permit. You're not looking at $20 million, nowhere near that. Sort of 3 to 5, you could do a lot of these activities. So yeah, taken together, I think we're in a really good spot. I'm really excited about this asset. We know there are 11 targets from the image log interpretation, and as I said before, there's no reason why some of these targets couldn't flow gas. So next slide, please. So another thing we've started, we haven't actually progressed too far because we want to get the data reprocessed. But there's actually a lot of interesting amplitudes below the Yarragadee. So the main reservoir here is the Yarragadee Reservoir, Jurassic. Most of the wells sort of TD around 4,100, 4,200. There's other wells in the basin today that have found gas at 5,200, 5,300 meters. So there's still about 1,000 meters of potential that we haven't tapped. Interestingly as well, Warro 2 and Warro 3 have likely penetrated the Cata and or Catamara coal measures. And actually Warro 2 and 4 have actually TD'd in gas. Now, again, I don't want to cast aspersions on previous operators. I don't know why they had to stop where they did. But as you can see in this interpretation, this is Steve Adams' interpretation of Warro 2 right at the bottom. You can see these red zones here, they're the gas. So, there's deeper potential below Warro 2 and it doesn't match up with these amplitudes. Similarly in Warro 4, you can kind of just see the last little perforation zone here in that little red T in that track. This here's the mud gas log. So the mud gas, which is ahead of the tools, that's got gas, and the tools behind it interpret gas, as we can see from the gamma and from the resistivity. So yeah, I mean, how much more gas is below Warro 4? We don't know. There could be another 100 meters, could be another 300 meters. Also, the thing holding us back here is the tight nature of the reservoir. So we've seen in other fields, granted it's in the Permian, but other fields in the area, in the Perth Basin, the deeper you go, sometimes the porosity can get better. So we're interested to test that potential. As I say, we've selected our preferred contractor for the reprocessing. They've got a lot of experience in the Perth Basin. And once that's done, we'll reinterpret it and hopefully find a target deeper that we can access from one of those existing wells. Next slide, please. So just to finish off, yeah, we've pretty much finished our studies. We're convinced that there is something to go after here, and it could actually be really good. It is the largest onshore undeveloped resource in the Perth Basin, as Michael said. There is deeper potential. We're looking to attract a farminee in the next sort of 6 months or so, and also plan the appraisal campaign properly. So identify in detail which zones we want to test, how much it will cost, start getting all our permitting and environmental plans and things in. Once we've done that, we'll try and get out to the field and actually put some of these tests into action. You can see the flare there. That was the gas that flowed from Warro 4 about 10 years ago now. So again, it's done it before. It can do it again. We just have to suppress the water and keep that dry gas flowing. If we're successful, and no guarantees, but if we are, we'll get reserves and we'll start planning for production. I must also say this is a very clean gas stream. You don't need a very expensive plant. We're only 30 k's away from the DBNGP. So once we prove the concept up and we understand how we can get a reasonable volume out, getting it to market's really quite easy, and it's a starved market. As I'm not sure if everyone's seen the AEMO report that came out last year. We put an announcement onto it. WA is in a bit of trouble. A lot of the traditional fields are starting to decline, and there will be an important opportunity here for small companies like ours to fill that gap. Um, so we're really excited about the prospect. I think we are quite undervalued as a company. If you look at recent activity with other players in the market, players that are still in the exploration phase, they've got 2 or 3 times our market cap. We've got the Officer Basin assets as well. So I think now's the time. If you want to join this journey, I think we're really close to getting some good results in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So I'll pass it back to Pete or Mike for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. It's very exciting. The one question that came through was the cost benefit of already having the wells drilled in comparison to drilling a new well in the basin.
Yep.
Where does that sit?
Oh, huge, huge. Now, assuming the conditions are right, we'd have to go in, do a re-entry, and check all the integrity of the cement and the casing, etc. But I mean, we have no reason to think they would have degraded in such a short period of time. But assuming all that's right and we can use them, you're looking at 20% of a new well to deepen something. You probably go down a casing string, but to drill ahead for another 500-600 meters when the well's already there, it's far cheaper than having to go through that, all the 4,000 meters, 20 or more days of drilling. It's a real cost advantage. So I think it's huge. It's a huge opportunity for our company.
And I know that this slide sort of gives a bit of color to this, but the technical hurdles remaining to unlock commercialization for the Warro Gas Field?
It's basically an engineering problem now. So as I say, nothing wrong with the rocks. So it's just a matter of geosteering a well in the dry gas zones, and then putting the right completion in. So I mean, when I was working in the Cooper Basin, you'd geosteer wells in the McKinley Formation routinely. So again, technology's come a long way. The capability of the industry's come a long way. I mean, Exxon in the US are drilling 6 kilometer, laterals. We probably don't need to do that much. But it's all possible now, and applying these technologies to Warro, I think, would really be the game changer.
Thanks, Nick. And I've got another question here. So can you explain why the previous operator didn't do the sort of work you are doing now?
Yeah, I can't speak for them, to be honest. Look, I don't know. And again, I don't want to cast aspersions. What I will say is that our experts are really keyed into these difficult fields. These aren't simple problems. Anyone can make a big field like Gorgon or North Rankin work. They're pretty much a bag full of marbles. These tricky fields, you really do need that sort of next level expertise, and that's hard to come by. So we're lucky to have Steve on board. We're lucky to have Image Strat, Andy Wilson, and also Molyneux with Nick Last. I mean, these guys really know their stuff, really know the Perth Basin, and I think that's our competitive advantage. Now, why the previous operator didn't do this, I'm not sure.
Yep. And can you explain how this asset compares to other gas assets in the Perth Basin? And who would you expect to look at this from a farm in?
Okay. Well, it's the largest one, bar none. I mean, it's bigger than Waitsia, bigger than West Erregulla, bigger than Lockyer Deep, all the big ones that we're talking about. I mean, this dwarfs them. So it's enormous, right? But it's tight. That's the issue. So farm ease, look, you'd expect the existing operators in the basin to be interested, I would think. We will start talking to them soon. I think we're at the right time for that. Equally, downstream users, there's a lot of people that need gas long term, fertilizer makers, heavy industry, all sorts of people require long term, reliable, cheap supply of gas. And we'd be really interested in having discussions with them and partnering up. So also overseas, as you can see, the trouble in the Middle East, I think, diversifying your geographic risk for perhaps people from East Asia, from Japan, Korea, etc. There could be people interested in joining us for that journey too. Now, I must say, obviously that implies LNG, etc. That's not necessarily the case, but having a large resource close to a major centre Could potentially offset LNG cargoes as well, so for use in Australia. There's a lot of people I think that would be interested, provided we can get it to flow, and that's our challenge in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. And then I don't know how well you'll answer this one, Nik, but given that the growing domestic demand in Perth for gas, how quickly could Warro be brought into production should there be a commercially viable gas asset there?
Well, as I say, and a lot of this depends on permitting times from the government, etc. But in theory, a small plant that doesn't have amine strippers, doesn't have mercury removal beds, and all that extra kit, because it's such a clean stream of gas, and a 30K pipeline, you wouldn't think it would take too long. I mean, again, it's very hard to know with permitting and the EPBC legislation and all that sort of stuff. But look, all right, 3 years, if we can get a commercial flow of gas with an existing well, and perhaps build a pilot plant, and the pipeline, then yeah, 2 or 3 years, perhaps longer if we want to build a larger plant and it takes a bit more time with the permitting. So really, the permitting is the key here.
Yep. And I know most small explorers would love to answer this question, but if the asset is how you've described, why is the market not valuing you? So, I mean,
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, Peter. I think it has had a lot of baggage, and nothing was done on this asset for a very long time. Perhaps as well, given the data set or the interpretation of the data that the previous operators had, perhaps there just wasn't a path forward. And we came into this with an open mind. Like, back in October, I didn't know that the next 2 studies would be so positive. So, I mean, I don't know why the market's not giving us the love, to be honest. I think it should be worth a lot more, given we are sitting on the largest resource in the Perth Basin.
Yep. Yeah.
I might just quickly add, Nik, to that question, the answer to that question, as a as a broker, and anyone on this call who's been in markets for years knows and understands how this space works. Things are undervalued until they're not, right? So there was always that inflection point where suddenly you get, interested new parties start to outweigh old stale holders who are like happy just to get out of the story they've been in for 3 or 4 years. That's where we are now. I mean, we have a couple of groups who really are quite keen to get involved, and those talks are ongoing, and they'll be concluded at some point. And then you're going to see that you're going to probably see things start to, the valuations start to, look more accurately reflect, the asset base. And this is just Warro, and of course, Officer Basin is a 1 billion barrel oil target and a hydrogen target. But obviously, with the price of oil doing what it's done, and with the US and allies looking for sort of, oil and critical minerals and all these other things, deposits in countries they trust and allies, etc. So we're potentially sitting on 2 significant assets. Why is it not valued today? Well, I imagine it's just supply and demand of stock, but that can tip quickly. And we know it, we've seen it 100 times before. Unloved companies that people thought were going to stay that way forever, and then something changes, and before you know it, the stocks run away from you, and you don't own it. So we're very bullish. We're very bullish.
I agree with all that. Thanks, Mike.
If there's any more questions, please send them through on the chat function, but we don't have any for now. I might give it 1 more minute. But thank you very much, Nik, for presenting. Very exciting story. Look forward to watching it continue. We just had one. No, you go, Michael.
I was going to say, I think a question's just come through. Who is on the register? Look, so about a year ago, AE and Peak were the joint lead managers. We targeted mainly sort of, high net worth 7 or 8 type investors. A lot of those guys have been loyal and have stayed and are still there. And the placement we did sort of late last year, similar story. So it's not really institutionalized yet, but that's, again, I'm talking to that idea that in the last 6 months, enough progress has been made that we are starting to get, small instos starting to inquire, Nick's had a number of really interesting meetings in the last couple of weeks. So I think you're going to see that register start to sort of build an institutional presence in the next 6 months. And again, all of the sort of top 20, we're obsessive about the top 20. Very little movement. The top 20 now probably own more of the stock than they did 6 months ago. Same guys adding on market. So I think the register has really tightened up and is starting to, I think, look quite good. And there's another question: when is the next capital raise? All small companies need to fund themselves. Everybody knows that. We're in the process of finalising that. We don't have any shortage of people who are willing to fund that. And really now it's just a process of trying to figure out what's the best value add, who's the best group to get involved with. And we are looking to bring in some fresh blood in terms of other brokers and institutions, as we said. And I think you'll see that play out in the next, 3 to 4 weeks. A couple of late questions coming through, Nick. What new data or drilling would you need to appraise the field, especially for any deeper targets?
Okay, so as mentioned, we need to reprocess the existing 3D. So that's not a new acquisition, it's just using the same data but with new modern algorithms. That's probably going to be complete in about 6 months. Costs sort of $100,000 or less. So once that's done and we've identified a target, assuming we have, then it's a simple deepening process. As I say, we may have to go down one size of casing string, so we might need a smaller sized tube, for a better word. But that wouldn't cost very much, and that would be sort of the data we'd need. We'd get the usual logs. We'd get more logs this time as well, so they missed out some critical logs, the previous operator. The NMR log's really important in tight gas fields. That's similar to a MRI scan, so that's pretty good technology there. And we'd get a lot more dynamic data. We'd do a proper pressure transient analysis with gauges down the hole, which wasn't done in the past. So again, all pretty straightforward stuff, and it wouldn't cost very much. So the other one would be a horizontal target in the Yarragadee. And again, as I say, we used to do this routinely in the Cooper. You drill these sort of in a couple of days. You geosteer to stay in the right zone, and you get good oil flow in that case, and hopefully good gas flow in our case. And then a revenues question. So what sort of revenues could this well produce per year? Rough numbers and life of mine. Look, I mean, to get it to the state of being commercial, you sort of need between 5 and 10 million scuffs a day, 8 BCF recoverable. I can't do the numbers off the top of my head, but we're talking millions of dollars per well in recovery. And there's a big resource base. So there's a couple of things. There's the flow, which is your daily produce, and then there's the overall gas that you get out of the ground. But we'll be talking millions of dollars a day. And then obviously as we have success, we drill more wells and develop that way. And life of mine, I mean, again, there's some complexities because we don't know exactly which areas will flow and which won't, etc. A lot of the structure is actually in the neighbouring permit, or there used to be a neighbouring permit. But even in our area, look, we're looking at about a T, maybe 2 TCF of gas in place, maybe more. It's a bit hard to say. We still have to redo all the numbers now that we've got the new petrophysics and hopefully a new structure in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. So, yeah, look, life of mine could be, tens of years. I mean, it's that big. It's the biggest one in the basin.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. I think that's all the questions done. I think we can leave it there. Unless you have anything else to add, Michael, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Nick, for presenting.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and hopefully you can join us on this journey in the next few months. It's really exciting. Have a good day.